Kia ora koutou. On behalf of the Institute of Managers and Leaders, I'd like to welcome you to the final session of our final development day for 2023-22. Today we already have had two great sessions with two great presenters, and this will be the third, all tied into this idea of seeing around corners and creating tomorrow's workplace today. My name's Nick Everett. I'm the New Zealand Business Manager for the Institute of Managers and Leaders. I'll be your host for today's final session. I'd like to begin by paying my respects and acknowledging the traditional custodians and tangata whenua of the land on which we're all on today, and also to pay respects to elders and tipuna, both past and present. The Institute of Managers and Leaders is the peak body for management and the largest member community of managers and leaders across New Zealand and Australia. This development day, our third for the year, is just one part of the great suite of learning and development resources that we have available to individuals and organisations. During today's session, we would ask that you please leave your microphones on mute, but I would invite you to post any questions or comments that you might have in the chat box on your control panel on the side there. Grant will also pose a couple of questions towards the end of his presentation, and we will try and answer as many of your questions as possible. After this session, do note that we will be sending out a collection of resources from each of today's presentations, along with the action plan for those that don't already have it. The action plans are a great resource to help you apply the learning back into your workplace. It's now my pleasure to introduce our presenter for this session, Grant Withrington. You might be familiar with Grant if you've attended a previous development day or one of our short courses or leadership programs. I'm always very impressed with Grant's ability to engage in a virtual environment like this, and I'm intrigued and excited by his theme for this session, helping humans to be more human. Grant is a well-respected facilitator and coach who believes the secret to an organisation's future lies in its ability to engage, empower, and inspire its own greatest asset, its people. He uses his significant experience as a senior leader and change agent to help clients create a leadership culture that drives business results by harnessing the power of its people. So Grant, over to you for the final session for the day, Skills for the Future, Helping Humans to Be More Human.
Thanks so much, Nick. And look, welcome everyone. If you're returning for the third time or second time for today, welcome back. If you've been to one of our development days before I've been presenting, welcome back to you. I'm really excited to be talking to you today about how to help humans be more human, because these are important skills for the future of the workplace. So you may be joining us today because maybe you've had experience working in a workplace where you might feel like you're tiptoeing around, making sure you don't tread on toes, because whatever you say sometimes doesn't get the outcome that you wanted. Or maybe you feel that you're working in an organisation where you become just a number, a human resource rather than just a human. Or perhaps you're here simply because you're curious about how humanity, being more human, can help organisations become more successful. So my aim is to really give you as much value as I can here today. And I think when I reflect back on my time, if I go back, a bit of a giveaway here, but over 40 years, in 40 years in the workplace, I've had 4 careers that have all been distinctly different. From service in the Australian military to working within a global organisation in the corporate world, to working for a decade in a not-for-profit as a volunteer, and for the last 10 years working within the leadership development environment. I've had the privilege, I guess, to be able to work with organisations that some are doing it really well and really knocking it out of the ballpark. Others struggle to achieve what they need to achieve. And it has really shown me the importance of bringing humanity back into the workplace. And I'll explain what I mean by that as we go along, because it sounds like a fairly nebulous concept. But I think the biggest lesson that I've learned over all of the years in working in so many different work environments, having my own experiences of great workplaces and not so great workplaces, is that coming to work, making money so I can pay bills, that's a fact. I know I need to do that. How I turn up each and every day, whether I choose to bring the best of me or the worst of me, that's a choice that I make. But turning up in a way that not only serves me, but it serves the people around me, it serves my customers, it serves my colleagues, it serves the people I'm privileged to lead, To me, that's an obligation. And when I look at the changes in the world of work over the last 40 years, something that's really stood out for me just in the most recent years is there are three main problems that get in the way of us being able to have workplaces in which people feel that they can thrive, not just come to work and survive. And the first challenge is that the world has become more connected, but we've become more disconnected. You just have to look at what's been occurring around the world with COVID forcing us to work from remote locations, and we're using Zoom and web apps a lot. Technology has us more connected than ever before, but as a species, as human beings, I think we've become a lot more disconnected. And this has led to communication becoming a bit of a lost art in some respects. We're really good at communicating transactionally, but we've kind of lost the skill, I think, for communicating relationships. That is, we're good at saying, how are you going with your KPIs? Where are you at with that project? But we've kind of lost the art of, look, how are you going? What's important to you? Is it okay if I share to you what's important to me? And the third major problem that I discovered is that the more we look outwards and we start to focus on other people's behaviours, the more we start to expect the worst of others or see the worst of others, the less we see the faults within ourselves. And so that means we need to look more internally. The thing is, when you overcome these problems, you'll find that you can contribute to a workplace where it's a lot easier to connect with people, and the relationships are improved as a result. You don't go to work merely to pay bills and, if you're lucky, survive work, but you can go to work, go to a place where people can actually thrive. So what I want to share with you is, based on what I've learned over the years and what I think would work for a lot of people, is to look at the future skills, those skills that we now need to see in the workplace a lot more than ever before. So much of the focus now in leadership development is focusing on developing those soft skills. It makes me laugh when I think about soft skills. Really, there's nothing soft about having to deal with a tough conflict situation, but it requires skills that workplaces don't often teach us. Experience doesn't often teach us how to use soft skills to communicate and relate more effectively with others. And it's becoming more and more important over the last decade, and the acceleration, the need for these sorts of skills is accelerating. And I think this is really captured when you consider that every success in life, whether it be business or personal, comes down to your ability to build strong, effective, mutually beneficial relationships. That's the end of the story. Whether it's inside of work or outside of work, you've got to build relationships. And the ability to build strong relationships also depends on your ability to communicate effectively. So building relationships, communicating effectively is key to creating future workplaces in which people can turn up and thrive, not just survive. So there's a concept that I want to share with you that you may have heard of before, called human-centered leadership. Now, human-centered leadership has a few core concepts. One is treating people with respect, and not just saying that you respect someone, but then demanding that they earn your respect, but treating people with respect regardless of who they are or how you may see them. Ethical leadership. Human-centered leaders understand their values and they live by their values. This means that as leaders, we can be more congruent with who we are as a person, because the way in which you express ourselves as leaders in the workplace, and whether you're leading a team or whether you're leading yourself, it doesn't really matter. The way that you express yourself, if you can be more connected with your values, then that connects you with who you are inside and outside of work. Human-centered leaders also encourage people to be the best that they can be. They value service to others and they strive to make the world a better place. And probably more importantly, they understand that making a living and making the world a better place are not mutually exclusive. So I want to give you 3 tools today that can help you if you choose to become more of a human-centered leader. And those are self-awareness, connectivity, and empowerment. And I'll break these down and give you a sense for how you can develop these skills within yourself. With self-awareness, I believe that every leader should develop a skill of self-mastery. Within self-mastery, there are 2 skills. There's self-awareness and self-management. So we deal in self-awareness separately here, but when we look at the other 2, you'll see how that can help you develop your self-mastery as well. So self-mastery is a skill that all leaders need to develop first and foremost. So when we look within, we can often find we get to identify the way in which we like to communicate, the way in which we like to treat people. We can get a better idea of our strengths and, to be honest, some of the challenges that we may not have been aware of beforehand. So you need to get to know yourself, know your preferences for how you communicate and how you relate to others. Now, I know there's probably some people on this webinar today who have attended some of our programs before where we use disc profiling. So you'll understand what I mean when I say that when you get clear about your preferences for how you communicate and how you relate to others, you start to look at other people differently as well. You start to get appreciation for how they communicate and how they relate. And when you get that, it's a lot easier then to be more flexible in your style to build those connections of communication and relationships. The second skill that leaders need to develop their self-awareness is adopting a growth mindset. Now, growth and fixed mindsets, you may be familiar those with the writings of Carol Dweck, for example, who talks about fixed and growth mindsets. Now, a fixed mindset is one where we consider that the skills, the talents that we have is all that we're ever going to have, and we can't build on those and grow. And a fixed mindset focuses on just making sure we don't get things wrong. But a growth mindset is focused on learning. A growth mindset understands that whatever skills, whatever talents we have now are not limited. We can learn new skills and talents and we can build on those. So as you work to develop a growth mindset, you'll find that you start to move more into a solutions-focused mindset rather than a problems-focused mindset. Adopting a growth mindset allows you to see opportunities where others may see barriers. Human-centered leaders also know how to play to their strengths and overcome their limitations. It can sometimes be a bit confronting when you start to look inwardly and you realize there are some things that you do that have undesirable consequences for others. But when you understand your strengths and you understand your challenges and you want to, in all honesty, in all sincerity, be the best version of yourself that you can be, you'll realize that playing to your strengths and overcoming your limitations will open up doors for you, not just for your own success, but also for the way in which you lead and relate to others. The fourth one is to develop a desire to become the most that you can be and then feed that. I'm sure some of you here may already be aware of the work of Abraham Maslow back in the 1950s and beyond. You may be aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in that, Maslow says that as human beings, we all have needs, and those needs stack one on top of the other and get more high level the higher we go up the pyramid. And the highest human need he calls self-actualization. And self-actualization means being the best that one can be. Now, when Maslow talks about it, he says that only about 2% of the population ever achieve self-actualization. He means only 2% of the population ever become the best version of themselves that they can be. But I think that's actually misleading, because it's not always about the destination, it's about the journey as well. And if I consider my journey over the last few decades, even just over the last 10 years or even 5 years, I can see how much I've grown in that time, moving towards becoming that best version of myself that I can be. I'm not there yet, but it's all about the journey, not the destination. I'm certainly much further along the road than I would have been if I hadn't started on this journey. So I think if we look at trying to become the best version of ourselves that we can be, this leads us to be much happier in our lives, in our workplaces. And some people might think, well, you know, I am who I am. Why should I change? And the thing is, we come into the world and we learn, we develop, we grow into adulthood. We have certain experiences. Sometimes those experiences change us. But the thing is, our character doesn't remain constant throughout life. Our personality, if you like, is something that's constantly improving, constantly changing, depending on the situations that we find ourselves in through our life. So I encourage people to look at how they can grow to become that best version of themselves. There's nothing inauthentic about trying to grow and become the best you that there is. It's when we get stuck in that notion that we are who we are, the world can just take us or leave us as we are, that we get stuck in an unproductive state. And the last skill for self-awareness is this ability to flex your communication style to suit the other person or the other situation. As a case in point, you know, there are some in this room who like to communicate at a very high level, very, very big picture people. There are others in the room who like to communicate at that fine detail level. So when you have people with different communication styles communicating, you know, big picture versus fine detail, sometimes it just doesn't click. Communication doesn't occur. The transfer of meaning and understanding doesn't occur. But if we understand that, okay, maybe I need to communicate at their level, then we can change the style to suit the situation or suit the individual. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that means I've constantly got to change how I am to suit the people around me. And it's really not as simple as that. Within us, we all have the capability to be flexible, some more so than others. When you appreciate there is an aspect of your style that may not be serving you, then you have the choice to change that, to adapt your behavior, become more effective in different situations. For example, I have a very dominant personal style, which means that when I communicate with people quite directly. Now, in some situations, that can come across to people as me being blunt or a little too direct. I'm just being me, but the other person doesn't quite get me the way I mean. But being aware of that, that means I can change the way in which I communicate to come across in a way that's not so blunt, not so direct. Does that mean that that's not the genuine me? I believe the genuine me is the best version that I can be. I keep coming back to this notion that, you know, we can all learn to grow and become better than we're currently at. So that's how self-awareness works for the human-centered leader. The human-centered leader also understands and appreciates how to build connectivity. So connectivity is another great tool. Now, connectivity means acting with integrity. It means adhering to a moral code, ethical standards, sound principles, such as honesty. When we act with integrity, we do what we said we'd do. We treat people with respect. We also ask that people respect us in return. And when we talk about in respect, for example, basic human respect is, you know, making sure that we treat people based on the respect that's owing to them due to their humanity, not the respect that we think that they need to earn from us. Leaders who have a good moral code, and it probably sounds a bit judgmental, you know, having to adhere to a moral or an ethical principle, there's no such thing as human behaviour without a reason. And the reason for that behaviour is that we're trying to get our needs met, and we try to get those needs met in a way that is guided by our values. And everybody has values. Sometimes people don't understand what values they have. When I ask a question, what do you value? Some people struggle to actually answer what that means. But when you have a clear set of what guides you to do the things that you do, then you can make sure that what guides you is constructive and productive and acceptable within the grander scheme of things in the community or in the workplace. It means doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. When we act with integrity, we bring people together rather than drive people apart. Empathy is an important skill that also builds connectivity. Empathy is about not just feeling something for someone, but feeling something with someone. Brene Brown, some of you may be familiar with the work of Brene Brown, once said that empathy drives connection, but sympathy drives disconnection. And I know there are people in this room right now for whom empathy is quite easy to access. You have a personal style that is very empathetic, caring, nurturing. For you, relationships are important. So it might be easier for someone with that kind of personal style to access their empathy towards becoming a human-centered leader. But I know there are other styles in the room, and I happen to be one of those styles, where empathy exists, but it's not our first port of call. There may be some of you who are thinking at times, you just want to say, look, harden up, buttercup. It is what it is, which isn't the most empathetic approach. That's that little voice in the back of my head sometimes. But then what comes out is generally a more empathetic response because we care about the other person. We care about how we impact the people around us. An interesting thing about empathy is that the more you practice it, the stronger that muscle becomes. It's just like any muscle that you take to the gym and work out. The more you practice empathy, the stronger it becomes. And when I consider my journey over the last few decades, oh, geez, that sounds bad when I put it that way, but it really has been a lifelong journey for me. But when I consider my approach to empathy a long time ago compared to now, I can see there is a massive difference in me. And it's something that I've been able to embrace now and say, well, empathy is now part of me. Even though my natural personal style might find that a challenge, we can all adapt our behavior to become more effective in the world. And the last tool within the connectivity tool, the last skill to develop is that of emotional intelligence. So if you've done any of our foundations courses, you'll be familiar with the notion of emotional intelligence, but it's about our ability to use and manage our own emotions and also the emotions of people around us. When we're good at managing our own emotional intelligence, it can help us relieve stress on us. It changes our behavior for the better, which can also reduce the stressful impact on other people. It enables us to communicate more effectively. It enables us to empathize better with others, and we can overcome challenges more easily and diffuse conflict. In fact, in some research that was done by Gallup a few years ago, they compared emotional intelligence of leaders with the engagement levels in their organizations. And there was a very, very clear correlation between emotional intelligence and engagement of the people that you lead. The higher the levels of emotional intelligence of the leadership, the higher the engagement of the people in the organization. The lower the levels of emotional intelligence, the lower the levels of engagement. And in fact, the higher the levels they are of active disengagement, where people aren't happy and they make sure that everybody knows. So to create an environment in which people are able to thrive rather than just survive, the human-centered leaders use their emotional intelligence to create an environment that draws the best out of people rather than drawing the worst out of people. So if you're thinking, how can I change the workplace environment for the better? How can I turn it into more of a human-centered workplace? You can simply start by looking at your own emotional intelligence and being able to develop that in ways that are going to have an impact on the people around you. The last tool I want to share with you is that of empowerment. Now, empowerment means, first of all, have a vision. If you have a vision of where you're going, that is something that can draw you forward. A bit like, as you know, if you set a goal and you work towards that goal, you've got that motivation to achieve that goal. Having a clear vision about the sort of leader that you want to be, about the sort of environment that you want to create for yourself and for the people that you work with is an important way of empowering you, but also empowering others around you when you share that vision with others. If you have a clear picture of just how you would like to create a more positive work environment, sharing that with the people around you means that they can share in that vision as well. And if they share in that vision, then they become allies to you on that journey to create a much better environment. And in fact, people will follow you, even if it's just out of curiosity to see what you do next. And for those of you who may have seen Simon Sinek's video, in which he talks about the golden circle, he says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So when you create a strong vision, and that's connected to your values, that's connected to your why, and if you can articulate that effectively to others, you'll find that people will come along on that journey with you because you've given them something that's worthwhile, worthy of their involvement. Accountability is the second most important skill for empowerment as a human-centered leader. The antithesis of accountability is blame. And I challenge anyone to look at any working environment where blame is the default behavior and say that is a productive environment, that is a happy environment. Blame pulls teams apart quicker than anything. Blame ruins relationships quicker than anything. So in order to get rid of blame, we have to create more accountability. So accountability is simply a matter of own it, fix it, figure out how you're going to prevent it occurring again. It's a simple process. And if you find yourself confronting blame in the workplace and you say, hey, we don't do blame here, folks. Remember, we do accountability. And accountability means own it, fix it, figure out how to prevent it occurring again. It makes it a lot easier to hold other people accountable when you have a clear process for accountability or clear way of describing it. But it's important that you role model that, because if you want to create a more connected, a more empowered workplace environment, we can't sit there as leaders and say, you need to do this, you need to be accountable. If not, I will hold you accountable, if we don't demonstrate accountability for ourselves. The thing is, if you're a leader, and sometimes if you're not, but if you're someone that people look up to, your behavior is always going to be on display. So whether you choose to or not, you will always be a role model. The choice that you do get to make, though, is whether or not you're going to be the most effective role model that you can be. So I encourage you to think about how you can practice personal accountability, role model that for the people around you, so that if necessary, you can hold others accountable, but you give them something to follow. You lead the way, you show the way. And the last empowering technique within the empowerment tool is that of coaching. Now, I said earlier that the most important skill that a leader can develop, and the first one they need to develop, is self-mastery, which consists of self-awareness and self-management. The next most important skill for leaders, I believe, is that of coaching. If we want to become true human-centered leaders, and we want to create an environment in which people feel empowered to bring their very best, then we need to take the position of a coach. That is, we don't give people the fish. We show them how to fish for themselves. If you are great at solving problems, coach your people in how to solve problems themselves so they can become more empowered. If you're good at making decisions, coach your people in how to make decisions for themselves so they can become more empowered. One thing I do want to say about empowerment is that it should only ever be done in the direction and to the extent that it benefits the organisation. Because sometimes when I talk about empowerment, some people think that that means that you just got to give people power for the sake of it, and that can erode their power. But it doesn't actually work that way. And there are certain personality types, and I'm sure there are some in the room for whom, at the moment, for whom control is an important need. And that's something that I can own for my personal style. Control is important to me. But I found that the best way sometimes to have more control over the working environment is to give away control in ways that's important for others. So I don't need to control you to get an outcome if I can control the way that I develop and share my vision. I can control how I hold myself accountable and be a role model for you. I can control the tools that I give you to do the job. I can control how I coach you to help you get better at what you do, to be good at problem solving and decision making. So human-centered leaders lift people up, and they use their coaching ability to empower people rather than potentially limit the growth of their people. So those are the three core tools around becoming a human-centered leader. And some things that you might want to consider before you head off on the journey to become a human-centered leader. Think about your own approach to leadership and ask, am I a truly authentic leader? Now, authenticity doesn't mean being your raw, unfiltered self, regardless of the consequences to others. Authenticity means being true to who you are with consideration for the consequences to others. It means being truthful, saying what you are doing, what you would say, what you said you would do. Allowing people to see you as someone authentic rather than someone who they cannot trust. Authentic leaders, by their very nature, inspire trust from others, and trust is key to building a human-centered workplace environment. You can also ask yourself, what are my golden values? What I mean by golden values are those values, the things that guide how you behave, how you navigate this world, that you're proud to talk about. Golden values such as respect, integrity, honesty, empathy. Something I've discovered in the years that I've been working in the leadership development world is that people can find it difficult to articulate what their values are. And sure, I've just thrown out a few that are fairly common, that people can say, yeah, I have that value. But I encourage you to get out there, Google list of values words, go through those and just see what resonates and see what lands with you. Because part of the problem, I think, is that we have lost the ability to articulate what is important to us. We've lost the ability to identify and articulate our values. But the thing is, you cannot ignore them. Your behavior each and every day is driven by your values. If you are happy and living a congruent life, which brings me to the next point. Is my leadership style congruent with these values? I think it's very hard to have certain values at home and then abandon those when you come into work. We can use the excuse that, well, work's a different environment, it demands this of me. But what I've seen is that when people have to be something different, when they have to interact with people in ways that just don't resonate with their deeply held values, then there's this feeling of imbalance or incongruity, which doesn't make for a happy leader or a happy workplace. The happiest leaders that I've found, and I consider myself amongst those, are leaders who, whether they're inside work or outside of the work, live true or congruent to their values. So I encourage you to have a think about your values and whether or not you live congruent with those. Human-centered leaders, by their very nature, are driven by their values, and their values, where we have shared values within the workplace, then we have culture. So if everybody becomes clearer about their values, what drives them at that deepest level, and we find that connection between others, we find where we have values in common, that's where we see culture start to grow. You can also ask yourself, how can I incorporate the best of what makes me human into my personal leadership brand? I want to talk about brand for a moment because something we don't often talk about within the leadership development space is how you can consider yourself as a brand. What I mean by that is that you behave in a certain way in the workplace. People see your behavior. They develop their opinions or thoughts about who you are and how you are. How they see you is your brand. And your brand is something that will always precede you. So people who don't know you can potentially know about you through the brand, about the way people talk to you, about you. So when we go into the workplace and we're just behaving not in accordance with our values in a completely unfiltered way, I had to say, guys, you're creating your brand. If you think about how do I want people to see me, what is the best way that I would like others to see me, you start to then move towards becoming that best version of ourselves. And that means that what we put out there into the public domain through our behavior, the way we treat people, becomes the way people know of us. It becomes our brand. And your brand will work for you or it will work against you. It'll open doors or it will close doors. So if you want to incorporate the best of what makes you human into your brand, think about this alignment between my values and the way that I act as a leader, and work to bring the best of you into the world. Because not only does your brand precede you, not only is it important to understand how you can promote your brand in a way that helps you be more effective in what you do, but in tough times, it can also help you be more effective in making decisions. There are times when I remember thinking in the past, having a difficult choice to make, what would a consummate professional do? And as I try to incorporate those behaviors and make them mine, I found that it was a lot easier then for me to connect who I am as a leader with who I am as a human being. And in doing that, I started to become aware of this brand developing, where nowadays I say, if I need to make a tough decision, what's the best thing I can do right now that enhances my brand rather than detracts from it? Because I know it's a bit of a throwaway line to say, what other people think about you is none of your business. But look, we're here to be successful. We're here to thrive, not just to survive. How other people see us can make our life harder, or it can make our lives easier. So think about your personal leadership brand. And the last question that I'll throw to you to consider is how you view and treat others. Is your behaviour passing the three-way test? In other words, is it okay or safe for me to behave this way? Is it okay or safe for others? Is it okay or safe for the wider organisation? And the reason why this three-way test is important, if you want to develop that your ability as a human-centred leader to bring the best of your humanity to the fore, is that often I see that leaders will behave in a certain way because it gets their needs met, but that behaviour doesn't impact well on people around them. So if I use the example that I gave earlier about control, I have a personality style which likes to have control. At its very worst, that could be micromanaging. Now, if I look at micromanagement as an example, is micromanagement okay or safe for me? Well, if I look at it as that's just me getting control, yep, I'm all sweet with that. I'm getting my control needs met. But is that micromanagement actually okay or safe for the people around me? And I'd be hard pressed to find anyone to say yes, it is. It isn't. Okay, so is micromanagement okay or safe for the wider organisation? No, it's not. It's not good for the people around me. It's probably not going to be good for the team. But there's a way, and I was describing this earlier about getting control needs met, where, okay, I decide that I want to be an empowering leader. I want to treat people with respect. I want to build an environment in which people can thrive. I can put all of my efforts around trying to make that happen. So does that get my control needs met? Yes, it does. Although I tend to call it influence these days and not control. If I act that way, is it okay or safe for me? Absolutely it is. I'm getting my needs met. Is it okay or safe for the people around me? Well, I think if you're going to be the kind of leader who goes out there and empowers the people around them, who lifts them up rather than pushes them down, I'm pretty sure it's going to be safe for others around you. Does that mean it's going to be okay or safe for the environment? Well, I'm pretty sure being that uplifting, empowering, coaching leader is good for the organisation. In that case, it's probably okay for me to behave that way. So this is a really good three-way test that you can use to consider the impact of your actions on others. If it's just good for you and not for anyone else, you might want to consider whether or not that is the appropriate behaviour for you. So let's just take a moment now to reflect on where we're at so far. So before we go any further, you pick up 3 powerful tools today to help you become more of a human-centered leader: self-awareness, connectivity, and empowerment. And I guess the core message that I want to leave you with today is that we live in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And we've all seen from the last couple of years just how volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous the world can become. And that drives disconnection. But human beings require connection. We require people that we can relate to. We require a sense of belonging. This is all human beings, more so in some than in others, but we all have that need. And if each of us learns how we can reconnect with that which makes us who we are, that which makes us human, and if we can find a way to bring that out into the world and help others bring that out into the world, then we can create environments in which not only are people coming to work and achieving what they need to achieve, not only are they just turning up to work to make money, they're not just surviving, they're actually thriving in what they do. And I think the future of work is going to belong to those leaders who can connect with other people on a human level. Those who can connect within themselves, connect their humanity and bring that out in such a way that they build bridges of understanding between people rather than putting up fences and walls of ignorance and misunderstanding. That is the future that I think awaits us all. This is why I think it's important that we develop these skills, and I encourage you all to consider how you can become more of a human-centered leader. So I'm going to throw now to Nick to see if you have any questions that I'll be happy to answer. But if you need to go, I really appreciate having this opportunity to share this with you today. I hope you've gotten some value out of that. But if you need to leave us, I'd say, look, laugh often, love deeply, and do whatever it takes to make the most of this one precious life. Thank you so much. Over to you, Nick.
Ngā mihi nui kia koe. Thank you, Grant. A nice, strong finish there and some really incredible insights. So yeah, please do use the chat box to type in any questions that you've got for Grant. Great presentation. Thank you, says Carly. Yeah, type those questions in. We've got a few minutes here, so I can pose anything to Grant that might have cropped up from that. Grant, I've got one to kick you off with here. You talked about empathy being like a muscle that you can work, putting yourself in other people's shoes. Can you give us any tips around how you can practice being more empathetic to build that muscle?
Yeah. As I said, some people find it easier to do, so it's not quite so difficult for them to exercise and strengthen that muscle. Other personality styles need to work a little bit harder to access that muscle. And I can give you an example of how that experience was for me. There was a point in my career where I realized that I needed to start caring more about people. Instead of being hyper-focused on results, I needed to focus on people. And I must admit at the time that the reason why I was interested in learning about what makes people tick is because that's how I'd get the result that I wanted. And so I would start to practice empathy rather than be demanding a results focus. I'd be asking people, how do you feel about this? What do you think about this? I'd start to look at them not as the problem is the person, but the problem is maybe the behavior. It's not the person. And I found that when you separate the individual and the behavior and you focus on the behavior being the problem, then it changes the way in which we look at the person. And over time, and I felt that, and I've got to be honest and say, when I first started practicing empathy, I had to become really, really conscious of what I was doing. Some of you may be familiar with that. Sometimes you are competent, but consciously so, which means you have to practice it. And I found myself practicing empathy, trying to look at things from another person's perspective is a key to that. Putting myself in the other person's shoes and saying, how would I feel if someone treated me this way, was key to that. And initially, it felt like, you're just faking it till you make it. It's like kind of like, there, I understand. It kind of felt really stilted like that. But the more I persisted with that, the more I put myself in other people's situations, the more I separated the person from the behavior, the more I found that I actually did start to care about people. I know that sounds really, 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 really weird, but it's now something that I cannot separate from who I am. So over time, that muscle has been exercised to the point now where it's just part of me. It's not something that I put on. Does that help, Nick?
Yeah, that's great. So what I'm hearing is, it can be pretty awkward at the start, but keep working on it. Yep. Couple more questions coming through. So yeah, please do send your questions through. We've got a question asking, do you know any good exercises to establish your personal values? If it's not something you've maybe thought about recently, do you have any suggestions for, I suppose, working through what you do value?
Yeah, a really good question. And probably the easiest way to start is just to search for a list of values. Often we can feel something, but we're not really sure how to describe that. Pardon me. So if you can create, just Google for a list of values, go through and tick them off, think, well, what really matters, what really resonates to me, with me, and you can get you can become more articulate around your values, because when pushed, it's easy for people to say, yeah, respect, yeah, honesty, yeah, trust. But when you look deeply, you might realize okay, family is actually something important. I intuitively know that family is important, but I don't consciously think about family being important. Legacy could be another one, leaving a legacy for others. It might be that when you examine your behavior against lists of values, you might realize, wow, everything I do is about leaving a legacy for other people. And that is a personal value of mine. So if you can make the connection between some values words that seem to resonate with you and behaviors that you exhibit, you'll get to see those values are being enacted through your behaviors. You get to appreciate that your values drive your behavior. There's no such thing as human behavior without a reason. If you want to know those reasons, think about what your needs are as a human being, and your values is part of how you achieve those needs, but it can become a need in and of itself, and legacy, as I've mentioned, is one of those. So it takes a bit of introspection, takes a bit of being willing to ask yourself those tough questions. What is really important to me? You can even look at people that you admire, someone that you may be consciously or unconsciously role modeling yourself on, and say, well, what is it about them that I admire? What value do they exhibit that I have decided I want to be part of me? I think it's an iterative process. Once you start, it continues to grow, and before you know it, you'll be at that point where you have a very clear idea of your values. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, really well, thank you. I've got a third question here. Do you see the application of human-centered leadership being different across generations in the workforce? So the three, I suppose, principles that you've shared with us today, do they switch? Do they change according to if you're Gen X, Y, Z, etc.? Thank you, Charles. That's a question from Charles.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Look, that's an excellent question. And what we know from research, and this is something that I think I shared in the last Development Day presentation, when we look at the research across the different generations, they actually have more in common than they have in difference. To give you an example, if we look at Gen Z and younger millennials, they tend to be driven by wanting to work for organisations who demonstrate that they care for them as a person. So for Gen Z and young millennials, definitely, number one driver, I want to work for an organisation that demonstrates that it actually cares for me as a person. If we look at the older millennials, we see the same thing. Their number one priority is to work for an organisation that can demonstrate that it cares for them as a human being. If we go back now to Gen X and to baby boomers, which is where I'm proud to say I'm from, that is only number two. Having an organisation that demonstrates it cares for me. Gen Xers and baby boomers also, they value an organisation that is successful and an organisation that makes ethical decisions. But second is this organisations that care for me. So if we look across all of the generations, right the way back to us baby boomers, everybody values having an organisation who cares for them as a human being. Now, that means that human-centered leaders will be able to resonate with people regardless of the generation that they're in. Because everybody wants to be respected as a human being. Everybody wants to be respected for who they are. And so I think that we don't need to change our approach for different generations in that regard. It should resonate with everyone. I hope that answered your question, Charles.
Yeah, thanks. A number of comments too coming through. Thanking you for the session. You've articulated a number of thoughts and confirmed some approaches that people, have been thinking about themselves. So it sounds like it has kind of hit the right nerve with people there, Grant. If there is Any final questions, send them through. If we don't, if they come in a bit late and we don't get to them today, we'll send them through to Grant and we can respond to those outside of the session. But Grant, personally, I'll just say thank you for being quite open with us and sharing your own personal styles and preferences. Very relatable to hear your journey as a background to the concepts that you were talking about. So thank you for that. I might use this opportunity just to wrap up the session and wrap up today's 3 sessions. So thank you to all who have joined 1, 2, or 3 of our sessions today. Please do take some time to review what else is on offer from the Institute. We do still have a number of short courses, leadership programs, events coming up across the remainder of the year. And you're always welcome to join our community of members and engage with those various things. So once again, thank you from myself, thank you from the Institute. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you at a future development day. And thank you finally to Grant.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. Good luck, everyone.